Welcome, race fans, to another episode of Photo Finish. I'm your host, Stevo. Today we're going to be previewing the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes from Baltimore, Maryland. Before we get started, I want to thank you for watching and listening. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the Spinnable Sports YouTube channel where you can find all these videos. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher, thank you for that. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you are listening to the podcast version, I encourage you to go to YouTube. I'm going to be breaking down the racing card for a couple of races on Friday and several on Saturday. And so I encourage you. YouTube's the place to be. I got some great comments and feedback from folks that watched our Kentucky Derby video. Fortunately, Kentucky Derby wasn't great from a betting perspective for this podcast, but we're going to get back on the horse, pun intended, here at the Preakness. As I mentioned, this is the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. It's going to occur on May 18th, which is Saturday, from Pimlico Racecourse in Baltimore, Maryland. The weather right now looks a little bit iffy. It's been raining a little bit this week so far. Supposed to be clear the next 2 days, so Friday should be dry for the Black-Eyed Susan. We'll be talking about that race in just a few minutes. Saturday looks a little more iffy. It's definitely going to be raining at some point in the day. We want to keep an eye on track conditions. Don't know that we're going to have fast, dry conditions for the Preakness. I think the track's probably going to be getting worse as the day goes on. As it takes more rain, we'll keep an eye on the turf races. I think we're only going to talk about one turf race today just because I'm not sure that some of the early races are going to stay on turf. So let's hop right into it. I've got my time form racing card, my past performance here pulled up for you. This is going to be Friday. We're going to talk about two races on Friday before we hop into Saturday's card. Friday, we're going to be talking about races 12 and 13. Starting here with race 12 is the Pimlico Special. It's a grade 3 being ran at 1 mile and 3/16 on the dirt track. Should be going off about 5:10 p.m. This race is for a 3-year-old and up. You'll see some familiar names as we go through this card. I appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. Leave us comments. We'll try to answer them, either myself or my producer, Drew. If we miss them, I apologize. A couple people said that they liked me already having my notes on the card here, that you could see what I'm looking at as I break down a race. So I've tried to, for all the races today that we're going to talk about, I've tried to go through the card already, let you know what I'm looking at and kind of how I see the race. Let's start here in race 12 with the number 1 Harlow Cap. Steve Asmussen is your trainer. Paco Lopez is your jockey. Not knowing what the weather's going to be like, I did kind of highlight when I noticed that a horse is ran on muddy or sloppy tracks. I did that for both Friday and Saturday, just not knowing what the weather's going to be like. I don't think it's going to be an issue on Friday, so I'm not as concerned about Friday's races as I am Saturday. But the number 1 here, you can see this horse has been put into some allowance races recently. Hasn't been in great form. Did win a race back in February at Oaklawn Park. A decent speed number there in February, but just hasn't really faced the level of competition, hasn't won this level of competition, and did not perform well on the muddy track that he has raced on this year. So probably going to be passing on the 1. Let's go on to the 2, Kingsbarns. If you've listened to this podcast for any period of time, you've probably heard us talk about Kingsbarns in the past. This Todd Pletcher, Luis Saez horse did run in the Kentucky Derby last year in 2023. Finished 14th, didn't have a great showing. That many horses in the race, though. He didn't have a great trip. He was unbeaten going into the Kentucky Derby last year, and since then has continued to do well. He won a grade 3, the Ben Ali, at Keeneland a few weeks ago. Had his best speed number to date at 120. So the 2 is a horse that I like and will be using, probably my top horse in this race. 3, Double Crown. I just didn't see anything here from this horse. All of his best numbers were from some time ago, earlier in the year and towards the end of last year. Ran a 122 back in February, but since then, this horse has been racing quite a bit and just hasn't shown a lot. A couple races off the claim, just was racing in some bigger races, dropped down to an allowance race, finished second. No speed number in that race from Parks back a few weeks ago, just 10 days ago, or 10 days ago by the time he's racing. So I don't like the three. I think he's racing too much and hasn't really shown a whole lot. Let's go on to the four. Pyrenees. Brian Hernandez Jr. gets the mount. Your Kentucky Derby winning jockey. He has won his last three races, coming in good form. His speed numbers are consistently improving. His last two races he's won on sloppy and muddy surfaces, but this is a pretty big jump in class for him. He's been racing in allowance races. The last one being a $120,000 allowance race, 58 something $1,000 races before that. So big jump in class. I don't mind the four. It's a horse I'm going to be looking at. I don't know that he's got the speed numbers to compete with Kingsbarns, but he's improving and he could certainly factor into this race. The five, Red Route One, another horse we've talked about in the past, Steve Asmussen, Joel Rosario, or your connections. He ran in the Preakness last year, finished fourth. If you go back, this doesn't go back this far on the printed version of the time form, but if you go back online, I believe you'll find that he also ran in the Kentucky Derby last year, I believe, or I can't remember if it was the Kentucky Derby or trying to get into the Kentucky Derby last year, but it's a horse that's ran in some big races to mixed results. He's won won a grade two, won a grade three, 4 wins and 19 starts. Pretty consistent this year, running in the 110 range and up. So this is definitely a horse that could certainly contend. Just basically a straight closer. So assuming the track conditions are good, and we got a fast track on Friday, I look for the five to hit the board. Going on to the six, Time for Trouble. Flavion Pratt, jockey on this horse. This is a horse that if the conditions do break down and it's a little bit wet, a little bit sloppy, a little bit muddy Friday, I think the six could contend. He's got 2 wins on tracks that are less than fast, but hasn't really shown a whole lot otherwise. Was in the same race as Kingsbarn back in Keeneland for the Ben Ali. Finished fourth that day. So I don't like this horse to contend on a fast track, but if the conditions are bad, then the six could be a play. The seven, Be Better. Brittany Russell is your trainer. This horse is Mike Rapoli, member of the Rapoli stable. Just hasn't raced in a race of this magnitude in quite some time. Did run at Pimlico last May where he won, so I do like that he's ran on this track. He's gotten a win on this track. Finished first and third on this track before. Did have a win a couple races back. So not bad. If you're looking for a horse to boost up your exotics, I don't hate the seven. I think you could probably even use the seven and be okay. Let's go on now to the eight, Royal Ship. Johnny V's on board this horse. Just a couple races off the claim from Richard Mandela. This horse was previously a West Coast horse where he had some success, and then for whatever reason recently just hasn't kind of found what he had at the start of his or at the beginning of 2022. And so I just don't see anything out of the eight recently, so it's a horse that I'm not going to use. So, I think I see this. I'll go back to the top so you can kind of see how I'm playing this. I've got this as the 2 over the 4 and the 5. So that's kind of how I'm playing it. If the weather breaks down, may throw in the 6, but I expect the weather to be good on Friday. So 2, 4, 5 for me in race 12. Probably would solo Kingsbarns if you're playing any daily doubles, pick threes, just because he is probably going to go off as the heavy favorite. And if you do like the 2, I think he is the horse to beat in this race. Let's go on to the next race we're going to talk about, which is the Black Eyed Susan. It's going to be ran at 5:44 on Friday afternoon. It's grade 2 It's for 3-year-old fillies and mares. It's the Preakness version of the Kentucky Oaks. Let's get into the card. Let me pull it up for us, and we can take a look at it. Despite my scratching out the first two horses in this race, I think it actually should be a pretty competitive race. I just don't see anything here from the one or the two. Neither of them have just barely a speed figure above 90 there from the one or at 90. Just don't think they have the speed to compete in this race. Let's go on to the 3. Lemon Muffin. D. Wayne Lucas is your trainer. Flavion Pratt, your jockey. This horse did run in the Kentucky Oaks on a sloppy track, finished 8th. The horse is improving in her speed numbers, but just still, I don't think she has quite the numbers to compete in this race. Did win the Grade 3 Honeybee back at Oakland Park, but given her showing in the Kentucky Oaks, I have no reason to believe she's going to come back here off a pretty quick turnaround and be any better. There's a couple horses I like better in this race. Let's go on to the 4, Call Another Play. Again, despite her winning her last 2 races at much lower levels, no allowance race and a $125,000 stakes race, just don't see anything out of this horse. Her best number is a 94. So we're going to go on to the 5, Gunsong. This is a Hennig Johnny V connection. This horse won at Gulfstream Park last time out in the Gulfstream Oaks. Excuse me, did not win in the Gulfstream her last time out, but did run in the Gulfstream Park Oaks back in March. She won her race before that, but her numbers are good, consistently improving, which is what we want to see. Lightly raced here as a 3-year-old. 107, 108 is her last 2 times out. Has ran on sloppy track again. I don't think that's going to come into play on Friday, but shows that she has won and has experience on a sloppy track and has won on a fast track. So it's a horse that I like. And if I did not mention at the start, the Black Eyed Susans ran in a mile and an 1/8 on the dirt track. So I like the 5, Gunsong. Let's go on to the 6, Shug McGahee, Luis Saez, or your connections. This is another horse, fairly lightly raced, but is also improving. I didn't put my arrow here, but you can see she is consistently improving from race to race. Took a pretty big jump the last time from a 92 to a 101. If she can improve, take another jump, I like 6 to contend. I'll probably be using some of the 6 underneath, depending on her odds. Post time, I may be looking at a win play show on the 6. If we can boost up 6 to 1 in the morning line, we'll see what those odds are closer to the race. The 7, Corpozo. Tyler G gets the mount. This horse ran in the Santa Anita Oaks back in April, where she ran a 108. This horse only 3 starts, but her first race is 98, then a 102, 108. I think she's shown what I want to see, just very consistent improvement from from each race before. I like her at this distance. I think the 7 can definitely contend. Going on to the 8, Recharge, Steve Asmussen, Joel Rosario. This horse is also improving every time out, or at least over her last 3 starts. Ran a 103 in the Grade 2 Fantasy back at Oakland. I don't mind the 8. Won her first 3 races, and then in a step up in class, came in 5th. So she is improving. I think that's what you want to see. Actually, going back up to my notes at the top, I think as I've gone through the card again, I think I'm gonna probably flop my horses here. I still like the 5 on top, Gunsong. I think she's consistently, at least over her last 2 races, has ran at really good numbers. But I think I would use the 7 second instead of third. I like Corpozo. I think she is, in just her 3 starts, improving at a kind of the same pace I'd like to see. I think she probably runs a 112 this time, which may be enough to win this race. So 5, 7, 8, 6 is kind of how I see this. The 6, if she takes a jump in another jump in speed, then she could certainly hit the board. And as I mentioned, probably looking at a win play show on the 6. But so that's kind of how I see the race. I like the 5, 8, 5, 7, 8. in the Black-Eyed Susan. If you're going to play any doubles with the Black-Eyed Susan and the Preakness, which I know a lot of books offer the doubles, I don't hate using all three of those horses, the 5, 7, and the 8. I think one of those is going to be your winner. I think 6, if she contends, she probably hits the board. I doubt. I don't think she's going to win this race. So I think you can probably get away without using the 6 in your multi-race bets. So let's go on to the Saturday card. This podcast is going to be a little bit shorter than normal just because of the weather. I don't have confidence that these turf races are going to stay on the turf on Saturday. We will talk about one turf race, but the weather is a big variable. I think it's going to be a sloppy track by the time you get to the races later in the day, and that's just hard to handicap. And so I just don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this card. And there's honestly not a lot of races that I really like on this card either. And so I'm going to talk about a couple here. Let's go. Let's start with race 6, which is going off at 128 on Saturday, and Saturday is the 18th. This is your Grade 3 Chick Lang. It's a 6 furlong dirt sprint. As we go through the card, you'll see here I've got some notes if the track's sloppy and kind of who I like. Starting with the 1, Mr. Skylight. Flavion Pratt's on board, Riley Mott. This horse has won his last 2 races. Ran a 107 last time out. It's a good number. I think the 1 could definitely compete in this race. You'll see kind of my picks at the top there, which we'll get back to in just a minute. But I like the 1. Lightly raced. If it is raining on Saturday, I don't know how this horse can run on a fast anything but a fast track. Just not a whole lot of experience. But I think it's this horse you got to probably use in your multi-race bets. The 2, Cats by 5, Steve Asmussen, Louis Saez. I wouldn't necessarily toss the 2. 4-1 on the morning line. Only 1 win in 8 starts. And you have to go back to October of last year to get to that win. Hasn't faced level of competition that I would like to see, but has ran on a sloppy track. Didn't do great in that one race on a sloppy track. So I probably would not use any of the 2, especially at 4-1 in the morning line. I just don't see this horse deserving that number. 5, Patinga's Twin. This is a horse that, if the track conditions are bad, I think I'd be looking at the 3. 5-1 in the morning line, 2 races on sloppy tracks. At this distance, finished second both times. Speed number second time out was pretty good. Hasn't faced the level of competition he's going to face in this race. But 6 starts, 1 win, 5 seconds. So I think you got to look at using the 3 to hit the board, especially if it's a sloppy track. 4, Sweet Saudi J. First off the claim, did run on a sloppy track last time out, where he finished second. I just don't see a whole lot from this horse. Just not a whole lot in the numbers. This horse I'm probably not going to use. The 5, Market Street, D. Wayne Lucas, Johnny V. Ran a 104 2 times ago at Oaklawn Park, where he won. That was in an allowance race, went up in class a little bit to a stakes race. Didn't have a great showing there. Finished 6th behind some of the other horses in this race. I'm probably not going to be using any of the 5. Let's go to the 6, Frost Free. Irad Ortiz on board. This horse has experience running and winning in the slop. Ran a couple of big numbers the last few races, even though it hasn't resulted in a win, 109 and 113 last time out. This horse has by far the best speed numbers in this race. I think you have to use the 6, and this is my top selection. Here's where we can find the value. I've tossed the 7, Catahoula Moon. 9-2 on the morning line. It's going to be one of your expect one of your race time favorites. Did win last time out. Ran a 107 at Laurel Park. But if you look at the level of competition he's ran in, that was a $49,000 allowance race. You're going from a $49,000 allowance race to a grade 3. Should be much better competition here. Even in the other allowance races, I just didn't see a whole lot from this horse. He's got the numbers to compete. He could win, but I'm taking a stand against the 7 and trying to boost my exotics with some other horses underneath, especially if I'm going to use the 6 on top. 8, Classic Joke, 30-1 in the morning line. Don't see anything from this horse. He does have a couple of wins His best speed number is a 102 on a fast track, but I just don't see anything consistently out of this horse that says he can run at that number. So that's your sixth race on Saturday. I'm going to be playing at 6 over the 1 and 2. If it's wet track or sloppy track, I really like the 3. May even use the 3 anyway. I do expect the 3 to hit the board. So I think you can solo the 6 in this race. If you're playing multi-race, making multi-race bets, I think 6 is by far the best horse in this race, and I'm betting on the 6 to come out on top. I'm going to give you a kind of a bonus bet that we're not going to talk about the whole race, but it's a race that I looked at thinking that the weather's going to be bad. If the weather's bad, it's sloppy track or muddy track in race 8. I like the 1 and the 3 on a wet track. That would be the 1 is Coastal Mission. The 3 is Super Chow. I'd be looking at a 1-3 exacta box. Also, don't hate the 7 Bourbon Bash. If you want to throw him in, make it a 1-3-7 exacta box and also a try box. Again, that I didn't break down the whole card for you, but that was just kind of a bonus throw in for race 8, which is the grade 3 Maryland Sprint. That is also being ran at 6 furlongs on the dirt track. Let's go on to the lead up to the Preakness Stakes, which is going to be race 12, grade 3 dinner party. It's going to be ran at 1 mile and an eighth on the turf course, assuming that they don't pull it off the turf, depending on the weather. I think they will pull other races off the turf earlier in the day to keep the track in good condition for this race. So I expect it will be ran. Question is the condition, whether it'll be good or probably even yielding if the track gets a lot of rain. But let's take a look at the 12th race on Saturday. It's going to go off at 5:52 p.m. The 1 Highland Chief, this is a horse that I've debated about tossing. Don't hate his numbers from earlier in his career, but he's just kind of been off a long layoff. Did not race at all, or raced once in did not race at all in 2023. Raced once this year back at Keeneland. Has gotten a race under his belt. He ran a 114, which is actually pretty good off a layoff. He had not ran until prior to that. It was the 2022 Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, where he did not have a good showing. So he does have a race under his belt coming off a long layoff. So, I debated about the 1. Ultimately, I decided to toss him. I just think, given this level of competition, there's a few other horses I like a little bit better. And I think this should be a good betting race. 2 English B, 15-1, morning line. Didn't see a whole lot from this horse. Only 1 win in his last 10 starts, and that was quite some time ago in an allowance race at Gulfstream Park. So not a whole lot from the 2. The 3, Balnikov, Phil Diamato, Frankie Dettori are your connections. Diamato's, West Coast trainer. Frankie's been riding on the West Coast. I like Frankie on the turf course. I think he's kind of a turf course specialist. So if he's getting the mount here, I think you got to look at the 3. Don't hate the form here. Has not won a race in a while, but his numbers aren't bad. So the 3's a horse I'm looking to use. Probably won't use him on top, but I will use him in my exotics. 4, Atone, Mike Maker horse. Luis Saez gets your mount. Ran in some pretty big races. Ran in the Grade 1 Pegasus back in Gulfstream in January. Finished 4th, but had a good speed number of 120 in that race, being ran at the same distance. His last race was on synthetic at Turfway Park. At this distance, he finished 2nd. I think when horse comes off synthetic, you never know how he's going to run on turf, but he does have this. Horse has a lot of turf experience prior to that, so I don't. That last start on synthetic doesn't bother me here. I don't hate the 4. 5, Running Bee, Chad Brown, Tyler G. He won his last race out at Keeneland. April, ran a 122 speed number, really good number. This is a horse I like. I'll be using some of the 5. Running Bee. 4 wins and 3 seconds and 9 starts, so good history here. 6, Crabs and Beer, won his last race in a dead heat. but it was a $48,000 allowance race. Just don't see a whole lot from this horse in his numbers. It's a pass for me. The 7 Adamo is interesting. Chad Brown, Flavion Pratt. This horse I feel like should be much better than he has been. 22 starts, 5 wins in his career. His last win being at Monmouth Park in 2022. But he's ran in some Grade 1s, mainly all Grade 1s, and his last was a Grade 2. So he's ran in some big races against stiff competition. His numbers aren't bad. He just hasn't been winning. If you look back at a race back last October, he ran on a yielding turf course where he finished third, but he ran on 124, so that's still a good number. I expect the weather's going to be bad on Saturday, so the 7 Adama is a horse I'm probably going to be using somehow. We'll check the track condition closer to post time. 8 Helms Deep. I don't see anything from this horse. There's nothing there. He hadn't ran against any competition, much less good competition. 50 to 1 is generous. The 9 at 5 to 1 on the morning line. Beatbox. Joel Rosario's on board. This is a horse I don't mind using some of. 2 starts out, Fairgrounds back in February. Had a little bit of layoff here. Ran pretty good. His last race ran a 120, but finished fourth. I don't mind the 9. I think he can compete with some other horses in this race. Probably wouldn't be using him on top, but if you want to use him underneath, I don't hate that. The 10 Emmanuel. Gone back and forth about this horse, Ty Pletcher, Irad Ortiz. Probably going to be taking money just because of the trainer and the jockey combo. What I don't like from this horse is he ran a few weeks back in the Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland, finished fifth. His number was good, but you'll see here on the note he faded in that race. And this race is being ran at a mile and an eighth. And if he faded a mile, I've got concerns. Did win his start before that a mile and 16th, but I'm probably going to take a stand and not use the 10. Hope to boost up my exotics by not using what may be the post-time favorite when this race goes off. 11 Eons. Don't see a whole lot from this horse. 31 starts, 8 wins. Not terrible. 20 to 1 on the morning line's probably about right. There's a lot of horses I like better. Let's go on to the 12, which is the last horse in this race. Fantastic again. Wesley Ward is your trainer. John Velasquez is your jockey. I tend to like Wesley Ward more in turf sprints. This is a little bit longer distance than what I believe his specialty is, but this horse has done well for him. 9 starts, 4 wins, second, 2/3, so he's got a pretty good percentage of hitting the board. What I can't figure out is he has not ran on turf that much. He has ran once on turf at Pimlico and finished second. That was back almost a year ago to the day in a stakes race on May 20th. He finished second, ran a 116, came back Turfway Park and Synthetic in a allowance race, which he won, and then ran a Grade 3 at Turfway Park. So I can't figure out the 12, even though his winning percentage is pretty good. It hasn't been on the turf. He's only got 1 race on the turf in his last, in his last 9 starts, he's only ran on the turf twice. And so I just don't know what to do with the 12. I've gone back and forth. I probably will be using some of the 12 underneath for sure. You see kind of here, I just keep going back and forth. I originally had the 5, 12, 3 over the 7, 4, 9. I don't know how I'm going to put it together. I do like the 5 horse in this race better than any other horse. I like Running B, your Chad Brown horse here. So I like the 5 on top for sure. I don't hate the 3. If it's wet, I'm going to be using some of the 7 for sure. So just got to wait and kind of see what the track conditions are closer to the race. But 5 I like on top. Running B, that's my pick to win the 12th. Let's go on to your featured race, which is going to be the Preakness Stakes, going off at 7:01 p.m. on Saturday. And this is the 149th edition of the Preakness, being ran at a mile and 3/16 on the dirt track. I'm recording this on Wednesday, and we had a big scratch today. Your morning line favorite Muth has scratched with a fever, and so we'll talk about Muth as we go through the card. He's still on my past performance. You'll see I've scratched him out, but we'll talk about Muth and how that affects this race. Let's start with the one Mugatu, 21 in the morning line. Joe Bravo's on board. Ran his top speed figure by far last race out in the Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland, trying to get in the Kentucky Derby. Didn't quite make it. Finished fifth. But prior to that, this horse ran on synthetic and turf, almost primarily. One other race on dirt. I'm going to scratch the one or toss the one. I don't really care for Mugatu. The two Uncle Heavy, I read Ortiz on board, 21 in the morning line, finished fifth in the Wood Memorial. Again, trying to get this horse in the Kentucky Derby. Finished fifth, didn't have hardly anything in Aqueduct back in early April. Did have a win on a muddy track back in February, though. So, again, if the weather breaks down, I think the two's a horse that you want to keep an eye on. Uncle Heavy. 3, Catching Freedom, Brad Cox, Flavion Pratt. Finished fourth at the Kentucky Derby. Did win the Louisiana Derby before that. This is a horse I like. I like this horse a lot, actually. He's consistently improving. Ran his best speed number today at the Kentucky Derby, which is what you want to see at the Kentucky Derby. You want to be peaking at the right time. So he's continuing to improve. Just didn't quite have what it took to win that race. Was coming on there at the end. So I like the 3, Catching Freedom. One of the things that does concern me about horses that run in the Kentucky Derby is quick turnaround, 2 weeks. You'll see some horses race. There was a horse we looked at earlier that was running like every 10 days, which is pretty crazy. I think, you like to see 3 to 4 week layoff. I just think gives the horses best chance to recover. So the quick turnaround does concern me about the 3, but I'm still, it's not enough to make me toss the 3 entirely. Let's look at the 4 real quick. Muth, this horse did scratch. He came down with a fever today, so they scratched him. This Baffert horse was probably going to be your pace setter, or if he wasn't your pace setter, he's going to be near the lead. And if the track is muddy or sloppy, I think speed could hold. So, I really liked Muth to possibly kind of run away with it on a muddy track, but that horse is scratched. So let's see where the speed's going to be now. 5, Mystic Dan. Mystic Dan is a closer. He came from kind of mid-pack back at the Kentucky Derby. Well, not mid-pack. He was kind of settled in fourth at the Kentucky Derby. Did come in and closed coming up the rail. Ran a 118, which was his top number to date. And that, again, that's what it takes to win the Kentucky Derby. Is you gotta be ready to run your best race to date, and that's what he did. Kenny McPeak, good to see him get a win in the Kentucky Derby. Brian Hernandez Jr., his first Kentucky Derby win. And so he comes back here off a 2-week layoff. I think it's a quick turnaround. I said that a minute ago. Mystic Dan is a horse that could certainly come back and win this race without Muth in it. But there's just a lot that goes into kind of winning the Kentucky Derby and coming back and trying to do it again in the Preakness and off such a quick turnaround. I just don't think this horse is the type of horse that could do it. I will say that having won on a muddy track at Oaklawn Park back in February, if the track conditions are bad, that's probably what he needs to come back and win the Preakness. We'll see. Can Mystic Dan win first 2 legs of the Triple Crown? I don't know. I think he would need a muddy track to help him. I said at the Kentucky Derby I didn't even use him because I just didn't think the quality of the races that he ran in or that his finishes in some of the better races were what it needed to be. You can see the Arkansas Derby, he lost to Muth and Just Steel, who's also in this race. So we'll see. I may end up using some of the 5, but I don't like him to win again. So do with that what you will. The 6, Seize the Gray. D. Wayne Lucas is your trainer. Torres is your jockey. This horse won the Pat Day Mile back on Kentucky Derby Day on the undercard. Had a really good ride. I don't know that his numbers can compete with this race. He has ran a couple races at 1 1/8 miles Did not win, so a little bit longer distance. I think probably a mile is better suited for this horse. So I don't think he's going to compete in this race. I think it may be just a little bit too long for him. I like this horse at a little bit lesser distance. 7, Just Steel. Dwayne Lucas and Joel Rosario, your connections. Finished 17th in the Kentucky Derby. Didn't have a great showing, but he was bumped at the start. Just a lot of horses didn't really get out of the gate very well. So I think that had a lot to do with his 17th place finish in his speed rating. He did finish second to Muth in the Arkansas Derby. Again, I don't love the quick turnaround, but 15 to 1 in the morning line, he's probably going to be shorter than that with the scratch. I think 7 is a horse that you got to consider using because he's shown he could compete with Muth and has beat Mystic Dan before back in at an Oaklawn. So I think 7's a horse you got to use. The 8, Tuscan Gold. This lightly raced horse is trained by Chad Brown. Tyler Gaffalione's on the mount. 1 win in 3 starts. Ran in the Louisiana Derby. Finished third to Catching Freedom and Honor Marie. Did win his race before that. At Gulfstream Park, this horse is improving. Speed numbers went from an 86 to a 99 to a 112. So lightly raced, kind of an unknown. He's taken some big jumps in the speed numbers. If he takes another jump here, he could win this race. Tuscan Gold's going to be one I have my eye on. Certainly looking to place maybe a win place bet on Tuscan Gold. The 9, Imagination. Bob Baffert does have another horse in this race. Frankie Dettori gets this mount. We'll see if Baffert sticks with Dettori or not. Probably we will, since Dettori rode him in the Santa Anita where he finished second by a neck to Stronghold, who's not in this race. So I like Imagination. I think this is probably your speed horse. If the track is muddy and speed has been holding, we'll see what happens earlier in the day once the track conditions kind of break down. If they break down, I'm expecting a lot of rain on Saturday, so we'll see. But the 9 could be your speed horse. Speed could hold. He could go to the front, and nobody may be able to catch him on a muddy track. So 9's definitely a horse that I will be using on Saturday. Let's go back up to the very top of this form. How do I see it? I like the 3, I like the 9, and the 8. Catching Freedom's my top horse, followed by the 9, which we were just talking about. And then the 8 is Tuscan Gold, and the 9's Imagination. So that's kind of how I see it, 3, 9, 8. Even if the 9 does kind of break down and the muddy track wears him down, I think he's going to be way out front. Could run away with it, and if not, I think he at least hits the board. So I'm going 3, 9, 8, exacta and trifecta box, and we will see if we can hit a winner, and hopefully we do better than we did at the Kentucky Derby. So fading Mystic Dan may come back to bite me again, but we're gonna give it another shot. So 398 is how I see it for the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. Appreciate everybody listening and watching on YouTube. Remember to give us a like and subscribe anywhere you're listening and getting your podcasts these days, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. Thank you to my producer, Drew. And as a reminder, go to spinnablesports.com for all your sports news and notes. Until the Belmont in a few weeks, this has been Photo Finish. I'm your host, Steve-O.